Part 51. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Enchenmi-san. Chapter 522. Finally, Kaylan grabbed the bag filled with medicines and bandages. He shook it hard, and Valentina's legs were finally freed from their restraints, and she stood up straight. "Are you okay?" After the matter was resolved, Kaylan immediately distanced himself from the other party, even though in this narrow cockpit, the so-called distance was only a dozen centimeters. At this distance, the other party's hot breath, he could feel it clearly when it sprayed on Ian's head. "It's okay, thank you," Valentina said. "You're welcome. I should be the one to apologize. After all, I bumped into you, let's not talk about it for now. I have something urgent to tell Laugo and the others." "Which call button is it?" Kaylan poked his head out and looked at Valkyrie's console was buzzing around. This console has been greatly modified according to Valentina's usual usage habits. The layout of various function buttons is completely different from the standard model. Kaylan was momentarily for a while, I couldn't figure out what the unmarked buttons were for. "The blue round button in the upper left corner," Valentina said. "Okay, got it." Kaylan immediately pressed the button she pointed to, and then shouted to the pickup on the side of the console, "Hello? Hound. Layton. Leader Brea. Can you guys? Do you hear my voice?" "Kaylan," the Hound's voice sounded in the cockpit, "are you awake? Are you okay with your body? You don't know how high the radiation content in your body was just detected?" "I'm fine," Kaylan interrupted. "How is the situation now? What's going on? Are you asking? The giant pit, has anything changed in the giant pit?" "No, it's exactly the same as before you were unconscious. Those sunk crystal pillars didn't rise, and those big bugs were still lying there unable to move. However, the radiation intensity in the environment has dropped a bit. I think it should be the same as those disappearing green pillars. Light has a lot to do with it." "How long have I been unconscious?" Kaylan asked again. "Wait a minute, let me check my watch. It won't be long, about half an hour." "Half an hour?" Kaylan was slightly stunned. Although there was still a dull pain in the depths of his head, his overdrafted mental strength had already recovered, and before that, when he was practicing time stop by himself, if the mental energy is exhausted to the point where it is almost bottomed out, it will take at least 10 hours of sleep to recover. Calculated in this way, Ian's mental power recovery speed has been increased by at least 20 times, and the frequency of use of time stop can be greatly increased, but the problem is that Kaylan has no substantial experience of becoming stronger at all. He couldn't be sure whether he was enhanced in that abnormal space or after coming into contact with the metal ball. But now that his mental strength has been restored, there is no reason for him to delay in the cockpit any longer. Kaylan opened the hatch cover directly, turned over, and landed on the ground. "Damn it! Why did you jump out like that? There is still residual radiation outside. Are you desperate for your life?" When the hunting dog saw Kaylan jumping out, he immediately cursed and then kicked Layton in the face. "On the butt, where is Ian's power armor? Has it been repaired? Put it on him quickly." "It can't be that fast." Layton wiped off the footprints on his butt with some grievance and said, "The light curtain just now almost evaporated the filling gel used for buffering in the armor sandwich. The newly injected, it takes more than 6 hours for the gel to solidify. Do you think I will believe your fart? If that light curtain can really burn the gel clean, why is Kaylan okay?" Hound said as he quickly found a spare protective suit and threw it away. Gave it to Kaylan. "Do I need to lie to you?" Layton stretched out his hand, and in his palm were strips of charred and cracked things like rubber that had been roasted by fire. There is still some residual gel near the cooler and heat dissipation pipes, but they are all baked like this. The temperature of this light curtain is really not low, at least over 1,000 degrees, and even my manipulator was damaged." Layton said, suddenly glanced at Kaylan, and lowered his voice. I don't know why Kaylan was unscathed, Maybe it's because the civilization that built this battleship has too advanced technology and can achieve ultra-high precision. A precise strike, that's about it. Leighton originally wanted to say that this might be related to Ian's own special ability, but considering that Aya and others were present, he could only put the blame on the third civilization. Lan put on the protective clothing, took 2 more anti-radiation pills handed over by the Hound, then walked slowly to the extinguished console and stood still. "Wait a minute, Lan, you don't know how to do it, do you want to try again?" The corner of the Hound's eye twitched. "You were unconscious for half an hour just now. It was just a mental overdraft. It has recovered now." "The cost of trial and error is not big," Lan said solemnly. "Those crystal pillars did not rise again, which shows that the first contact was not in vain." After coming out of the mecha, Lan immediately focused his attention on the console. However, those memory fragments were still hidden behind the mist and had no intention of emerging. He was basically certain that the only way to get those things out was to connect himself with this ancient battleship again. When he first connected, he had a vague feeling that the mental power he had taken away seemed to be used to fill something similar to a progress bar, but his total mental power was too small. Even though it was sucked dry, the progress bar could not be filled up. Then, if it doesn't work once, how many more times should we try? With this thought in mind, Lan once again placed his hands on the metal ball. This time, the metal ball lit up with soft white fluorescence. The scene in my memory matched up. Lan was immediately excited. He could clearly feel that this time, his mental power was only taken away a little bit and then stopped. That progress bar seems to have been filled. "Lan? Lan, are you okay?" Others naturally noticed the difference between the metal ball and the first time they came into contact with it. However, due to Leighton and Aya's previous experience, no one dared to reach out this time. "Touch Lan." "I'm fine," Lan replied. "I feel like this console is like a battery that needs to be recharged with mental power, but it is now fully charged." A super battleship of the size of Yagonactor cannot be driven by just a small amount of mental power. This is like a 120 kilowatt air cushion vehicle, which is generally equipped with a battery with a capacity of 80 kilowatt hours. Ian's mental power is equivalent to 2 dry batteries. After being connected to the car engine, he can't even reach the threshold to start it. But the console is obviously not an engine. This thing is more like a small remote control. For the remote control, 2 dry batteries are completely enough. A loud sound of rocks rubbing against each other came from above their heads. As soon as everyone raised their heads, they found that the dome directly above the giant pit had fallen down and was embedded perfectly into the giant pit. The sound of crystals being crushed came from the bottom of the pit. At this time, those crystal pillars had sunk, and those that could be crushed by the dome were probably those tragic crystallized lava canteras. But what puzzled everyone was that there was no explosion sound during the whole process, and they didn't know whether the completely crystallized lava canthafida had lost its ability to self-destruct, or whether this ability was restricted by the giant pit. The huge pit has disappeared from the field of vision, replaced by a thick square stone pillar. It is actually not accurate to say that it is a stone pillar. After all, the length and width of this thing are already 4.5 times the height. Even if it is embedded in the giant counting the part of the pit, it was twice as long. As for the length of the part above the dome, they were not able to detect it clearly. The originally empty power room instantly turned into a return-shaped corridor. There seems to be some pattern on it, it seems to be writing. A sharp-eyed agent suddenly pointed at the lowered stone pillar and shouted. "It's not words," Leighton said immediately, "these patterns are all crystal structures embedded in the surface." Only then did everyone realize that the material of the stone pillar was not actually rock, but a crystal as black as ink. The surface of this supercrystal pillar is covered with delicate and complicated unknown circuits. Leighton was almost certain that this thing was the engine of this ancient battleship. At the same time, a strange consciousness invaded Ian's mind. Initialization completed, do you want to start? This consciousness asked Kaylan. Start up? Does it mean activating this ancient battleship? Has this battleship not been activated before? Otherwise, why were those lava beetles at the bottom of the pit still alive when they entered? If Park Sang-woo successfully activated this battleship, these big bugs should have been crushed to death, right? But if Park Sang-woo failed to launch it successfully, how did the battleship get into the air? How were the earthquakes in the molten mine area triggered? A series of questions popped up in K-Ian's mind. He wanted to throw them all to the strange consciousness that invaded his mind, but he soon discovered that this consciousness from the battleship did not have the ability to communicate independently at all. The intelligence of this thing is not even as good as the AI steward on the Ark. Facing this thing, Kaylan can only choose from the options it gives. Now that we have come this far, there is no reason to stop here. Start, Kaylan shouted out softly in the real world while answering this question. A strong pressure was immediately exerted on everyone, and the hound who didn't stand up in time even sat down on the ground. What's going on? Why do I feel that the gravity here seems to have suddenly increased several times? It's like something is pressing on me, and breathing has become a little difficult, Hound said nervously. He originally planned to try. He climbed up from the ground, but when he found that the gravity was gradually increasing, he simply lay down. In this position, the pressure on the body would be much less than standing, and there would be no pressure caused by a large amount of blood pooling downwards. Symptoms of dizziness. It's not that the gravity has increased, it's that the gravitational acceleration we are experiencing has increased, Layton reacted immediately. This thing is the G-force that pilots often talk about. This a battleship, it is rising at a high speed. G-force? What kind of broken battleship? Doesn't it even have this kind of protective measures? Hound complained while panting heavily. In terms of physical fitness alone, he should be the worst in the team. That's it, and the G-force exerted on him at this time has already made this old hunter who is half a year into his destiny a little bit too much. There should be protective measures, but they don't take effect on those of us, Layton said, his eyes already shifting to Kaylan. At this time, the white light curtain on K-Ian's body appeared again. Under this light curtain, his expression was very calm, and he seemed not to feel the terrifying G-force brought by the battleship when it was raised. You must know that the powered armor worn by Hound and Layton is itself an anti-gravity suit, which can reduce the G-force endured by the wearer to a certain extent. However, the spare protective suit Kaylan temporarily put on only has a single protective effect, will not help slow down the G-force. Now even the armored hounds and others can't bear the G-force. Kaylan can still stand calmly without any protective measures. Obviously, it has something to do with the light curtain on his body. Kaylan, are you in control of this battleship now? Can you control its flight direction? And, can you see the scene outside the battleship? Aya leaned against Valkyrie and held up her hands. On top of his knees, hunched over, he asked loudly. P.S. Thanks to book friend 2020311085228841 for the 500 starting coin reward, thanks to Xiaoyang Shizhou for the 111 starting coin reward, thanks to number 5 Ball for the 100 starting coin reward. PPS Recently, I have seen many readers complaining about the pacing problem. They feel that the chapter after entering the tunnel is too watery. I think it may be because I updated it a few days ago, so the chapter may be a little watery. Secondly, I have been thinking about the strength of the protagonist. The lack of coolness is indeed a problem, but I hope to find an average between cool and rigorous. It must be cool to be cool after all. We are an online novel, but I want to write something other than the brainless fun of wireless streaming, so it may take more time to design the plot. I hope you can bear with me. Starting from today's chapter, the progress of the plot will speed up. With so much foreshadowing, it's time for something big to happen. In addition, I would like to express my special thanks to my Silver League boss San Shi-san for discussing the plot at noon with me, which gave me a lot of inspiration and also helped me understand what kind of content readers want to see. I will try my best to it is possible to improve yourself and your works, and you will definitely not let down everyone's love and subscriptions. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, and Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 524. Kaylan didn't answer her, but this time, it wasn't because Kaylan couldn't be distracted, but because he couldn't hear the sounds around him at all. The members of the reconnaissance team, the power room, the giant pit, the boulder covered with crystallized circuits, and even the stone pillars under the console have all disappeared from Ian's field of vision, leaving only the metal ball emitting this faint fluorescence, still floating in front of him. He lowered his head and could see that his body was suspended in the air like the metal ball, and around him was flowing magma that was emitting blazing light. The magma seemed to be separated by some invisible position and kept rolling down. No, it shouldn't be said that the magma was falling, but that Ian's perspective was rising rapidly. This battleship is breaking through the magma. Kaylan quickly understood the current situation. Everything he saw should be the external observation perspective of this ancient battleship. The control technology used by this civilization directly connects the consciousness of the battleship and the operator, which is commonly known as the man and the ship are one. The ship is a man ship, and the man is a ship. Whoever wants to be a shipman can do it. I'm not interested anyway, Kaylan complained in his heart, while gently pushing the metal ball in front of him with both hands. Suddenly, the perspective in front of him changed dramatically. Originally his standing face was perpendicular to the rising angle, but now, it was almost parallel. He just floated on his back, looking at the layers of magma that were constantly being broken open directly above him. But what Kaylan didn't expect was that such a gentle push would cause serious harm to others. The members of the reconnaissance team were struggling to bear the G-force exerted on their bodies, but at this moment, the ground suddenly tilted to one side. The hound lying on the ground was caught off guard and slid down. If Valkyrie had not stretched out a mechanical arm in time to catch him, he would have rolled and slid to the bottom of the slope. The bottom of the slope referred to here was the wall of this power room a few seconds ago. Damn! Is this place going to collapse? Shouted the hound hung in mid-air by the mechanical arm. It's not collapsed, it's Yagunactor. This battleship is taking off, just like our airship raises its bow to raise its height, Layton replied. With a sharp the hook popped out of his mechanical arm and penetrated deeply into the ground. When the airship raises its altitude, it raises its bow in order to reduce its own air resistance, and this ancient battleship is now being pressed by billions of tons of magma at the bottom of the pool. The resistance it experiences is greater than that in the air. I don't know how many times. The entire power chamber is tilted at an angle of nearly 45 degrees, and the direction of G-force application has also changed from directly above to obliquely above. Others also used similar methods to Layton to hang themselves on the slope. Valkyrie directly turned on the bombardment mode and drove the bracket nails on several legs directly into the rocks. Fortunately, the floor of the power room is made of ordinary rock material. If nano alloy had been used, the entire reconnaissance team would have rolled down to the bottom of the slope, including the mecha. Old dog, go ahead. Layton used his free hand to take out a pair of climbing suction cups from his backpack and threw them to the hound. Then he raised his head and glanced at Kaylan, who was still standing in front of the console. Ian's body seemed to be completely unrestricted by gravity. He was like a human-shaped spike driven into the ground, always staying perpendicular to the sloping ground. Field Corps, 7th Armored Mixed Division, Mukok Military Base. Lieutenant General Maginot was in a bad mood. To be precise, bad is not enough to describe the degree of his current depression. If the coffee cup on the table was not a priceless antique handed down from the old era, he would definitely not hesitate. Smash the cup against the wall. Did I offend some big shot? Maginot put his forehead with his hands and thought in annoyance. 2 days ago, he was handling daily official duties in his office. An encrypted and urgent special transfer order instantly transformed him from a garrison commander responsible for public security to a military commander of a front-line combat force of a field corps. Officers. Although from a certain perspective, this wave of transfers can be regarded as a promotion for him by half a level, officers of the same level in the field force and fleet are by default half a level higher than those in the garrison, and the number of soldiers under his command is also the original 3,000. The old and weak became 7,000 elites, but Maginot couldn't be happy no matter what. There is no other reason. The new defense area he is responsible for happens to be the Mukak military base at the intersection of the four planes. The location of the Mukak military base is very important. It connects the most extensive plains on Alpha Planet in four directions, and passes through the Hell Corridor sandwiched between the western plains and the Mortar Swamp. It is the famous Molten Mine area. The location of the Mukak military base is the most important transportation hub in the northern hemisphere of Alpha Star. If it were placed on the Earth, there would be no such thing as the thoroughfare of 5 provinces and the battle for military strategists. Names like land. But the convenient transportation also means that the space is safe. If you look down from a high altitude, the Mukak base, which is located alone on the open plain, looks like a nail in the middle of the road. Just like every household, you can be as conspicuous as you want. In the old era, it would be equivalent to sending a general responsible for security maintenance in the rear to the front line. But the problem is, Maginot has been serving in the garrison since he joined the army until now. In the past few decades, he has left the Ark 3 times in total, only 3 times. Otherwise, the lieutenant general's belly wouldn't hang from his waist to nearly his hips. Damn it, at least give me some experienced deputies. Maginot looked at the holographic projection map on his desk and couldn't help but feel a headache. He was very good at handling official documents, but he has a very difficult job of dispatching and managing combat units, especially in this Mukak military base. From the ammunition replenishment list sent by logistics management to the investigation of abnormal movements of heretical sects, everything is done in detail. It is up to him, the top military director of the base, to solve the problem. This is different from when he was in the garrison. At that time, he only had to wait for the officers under him to plan the solution to the matter, and then he would take a few glances and sign. But now, even if it is a box of active ammunition, he had to call back to Ark in person and argue with the people from the General Logistics Department, the Security Bureau, and the Equipment Department of the Research Institute. Maginot once secretly laughed at his colleagues in the field troops who fought so hard for a few supplies, but he never thought that with the changing tides, he would be reduced to this. Fortunately, it has been relatively peaceful during this period, except for the molten mining area in the southwest, but the trouble in that place should not spread here. Lieutenant General Maginot murmured in his heart. The war is really not his strengths. If this were in the old era, you could at least surrender if you lost the battle. As a general, even if you were a prisoner, at least the treatment would not be bad, but in this era, the word surrender is basically equated with suicide. Neither heretical sects nor indigenous creatures would give him a chance to surrender. Rather than being transformed into a biochemical monster or being torn into pieces by sharp animal teeth, it would be more refreshing to shoot yourself in the temple. In the year 918 of the new era, the construction of the Mukak military base began. It took 4 years and was completed in 922. In the past 29 years, the Mukak base has had a total of 35 military chiefs, 17 of whom died in this base. In the past 29 years, the Mukak military base has been breached 11 times, and it has been recaptured and rebuilt 11 times. 10 of these times the enemies were the indigenous creatures of Alpha Planet, and the other time were heretical sects and exiles of joint forces. Lieutenant General Maginot happened to be the 35th one. Not counting him, exactly half of the previous 34 military chiefs died in office. The odds are 50-50, Maginot couldn't help but wipe the non-existent sweat on his forehead, and continued to stare at the holographic projection map on the table. A dozen blue dots were arranged in a straight line, and he approaching the base in the northeast direction. This is this week's supply convoy, which carries a week's worth of living supplies for everyone in the base. Lieutenant General Maginot felt that his life had always been smooth and his luck had been good, so he should not be half of those who died in the line of duty. But then again, most of the military directors who died in the line of duty died a few years before the Mukok military base was just built. At that time, the 4 plains were still unexplored areas with no human traces, land transportation is intermittent, and many times base personnel need to rely on the Air Force fleet to help transport daily supplies. In the 4 years since the base was built, at least more than 3,000 soldiers and almost the same number of workers and technicians were sacrificed. In the first year of its completion, the base was breached 3 times by beast tides. This place is an important transportation area, and it is also a must-go place for many herds with migratory habits. Large-scale offensive and defensive battles are staged several times almost every year. During those years, any recruit, as long as he could go after serving at the Mukok base for a month, you can get the Brave Medal when you come back. The service experience at the Mukok base has also become a very important topic for those veterans to talk about. However, with the subsequent expansion of the base many times and the increase of various defensive equipment, the wall has also changed from 2 circles to 6 circles, and the height and thickness have also increased several times. The casualty rate of Mukok base, the level has finally dropped, but compared to other places, it is still among the top high-risk strongholds. At least the first 3 military chiefs resigned safely. Lieutenant General Maginot comforted himself in his heart. At this time, an orderly came in carrying a tray. "General, your lunch." "Oh, just put it on the table." Maginot was stunned, turned off the holographic projection, and glanced at the clock beside him. "It's already 12 o'clock, and I've spent the entire morning arguing with logistics." When Lieutenant General Maginot withdrew his attention from the clock and shifted it to the dinner plate, his eyebrows furrowed again. The food on the plate is very simple: a few pieces of synthetic chicken cooked in plain water with almost no trace of oil, a fresh orange poured from a can that is full of the sweetness of inferior sugar substitutes, a bowl of watery clear soup with a few bean sprouts and slices of radish, plus a puddle of staple food that looks like a batter with too much water. The most outrageous thing is those vitamin capsules placed in the corner of the dinner plate. The daily diet of the base can only meet the energy needs of the people, the vitamins and some trace elements that are lacking, and they even need to rely on these capsules and pills. Replenish. The food of the military chiefs was in such poor condition, so one could easily imagine what the soldiers below were eating. This is one of the reasons why Maginot was unwilling to be transferred here. When I was in the garrison, although I didn't eat a lot of meat and fish, at least I could eat real vegetables and meat. When work is not so stressful, you can also eat steak and ice cream. Waffles coated with honey are also one of Maginot's favorites. If it comes to weekends, he will still take time to go to a Japanese restaurant or a Chinese restaurant to enjoy an authentic Oriental meal. But now, Lieutenant General Maginot looked at the plate of things on the table. The gap was so big that he didn't even have the desire to lift his spoon. I must have offended some big shot. Just as Maginot reluctantly scooped up a spoonful of batter, another soldier rushed into the office. Unlike the previous orderly, this soldier ran directly into the door. "What are you doing?" "Didn't I tell you not to disturb me while I'm eating?" Maginot said with some dissatisfaction. "I've been busy all morning, and you can't even let me take a good rest during lunchtime." "General, something happened." The soldier put his hands on his knees and said breathlessly. "What did you say?" "What happened?" Maginot's hand shook, and the spoon fell directly into the dinner plate, and the splashed batter splashed onto his clothes. However, Maginot no longer had time to care about his clothes. He stood up directly from his seat, ignoring that his bulging belly overturned the dinner plate on the table. He strode around to the desk, anxiously asked, "Tell me, what happened?" "ARC's transport convoy, the signal has disappeared. PS Thanks to book friend 20211112083818135 for the 2760 starting coins. Thank you to Soap has great use, Reading Giraffe, and Imer for the 1500 starting coins. Thank number 5 Ball and book friend 20190322115519899 for the 100 starting coins. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter, author, and Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 525. What? Lieutenant General Maginot shouted in disbelief. He first stared at the soldier who reported the message with wide eyes for a few seconds, then suddenly turned around and turned on the holographic projection that had been turned off not long ago. Map. The dozen blue dots that were approaching the base in the northeast just now seemed as if they had never existed. If Maginot hadn't been staring at this supply convoy all morning, he would have thought that he had happened. Hallucination. Those are urgently needed supplies for the base of more than a dozen vehicles. It also included fresh pork and vegetables that he could only eat once a week. He was really tired of eating this kind of canned synthetic meat that had been stored for who knows how many years. Of course, for someone who professed to love his soldiers like his own son, for Lieutenant General Maginot, this personal material enjoyment is only secondary. What is more important is the contents of the more than 10 vehicles left. That is what all the soldiers stationed at Mukake base have to pay for a week. Rations. There is no food synthesis factory in the Mukake base, only a very small hydroponic farm that can only grow some bean sprouts and white radish. If this truck of supplies cannot be delivered to the base, it will mean that the next period of time here, the more than 10,000 people in the base must rely on emergency prepared dry food to survive. Maginot had just checked the inventory list in the morning. The emergency dry food in the base included more than 2,000 cans and more than 5,000 bags of compressed biscuits. It sounded like a lot, but after being divided into more than 10,000 mouths, at most it was only can last for 2 days. If the supplies cannot be retrieved in 2 days, or if there is no support from ARC, the base will run out of food. Damn, is the previous military director an idiot? A base of this size only has 2 days of food reserves. Even someone like me, who comes from the garrison, knows that front-line bases must have at least half a month's worth of emergency reserves. Ration, with such a huge material gap, could it be that that bastard had embezzled it? The first time he saw this list, Maginot thought that he had to report Muka's previous job to his superiors. The military chief is suspected of corruption, but he has not yet written the report letter when the base's supply crisis suddenly befalls him. Send out the mobile reconnaissance company quickly and ask them to find the missing convoy. The supplies must be recovered, Maginot ordered. However, the soldier did not immediately turn around and pass on his order. Instead, he hinted something anxiously to Lieutenant General Maginot with his eyes. "What are you looking at me for? Go and give the order quickly. If we can't find the supplies, everyone will starve in 2 days." Maginot glanced at the other party's armband, and then he noticed that this man in combat uniforms and a steel helmet, this guy was not an ordinary soldier, but an officer with the rank of major. It's just that Lieutenant General Maginot has just arrived, and he hasn't fully recognized the names of the officers under his command. He can't name the major for a while. He only remembers that this guy seems to be the battalion commander of a reinforced battalion of the combat force. Seeing that Maginot was completely unaware of the seriousness of the problem, the major took a deep breath and then said in a deep voice, "General. The location where the convoy signal disappeared is only 30 kilometers away from the base. The road conditions in this area are very stable. Now is not the migration period, and it is rare for large-scale indigenous creatures to appear. There is only one possibility for the convoy to disappear. They were attacked by a heretical sect. And there are definitely a lot of enemies." He took a breath and continued, A small group of exiles or members of a heretical sect would not dare to attack our convoy so close to the base, because as long as the convoy signal disappears, in such an open plain zone, they won't be able to run far before they are overtaken by the troops sent by the base. I think this may be a premeditated attack, and the target of the attack is not the supply convoy, but here. You mean, they were coming to the Mukake base? The convoy was attacked, but they happened to hit it. Maginot was stunned and asked hurriedly, he was sitting too comfortably in his seat. After a long time, his mindset has not changed for a while. When the convoy disappeared, his first reaction was the loss of supplies, but this major was different. He had stayed at Mukake base for 4 full years. A real front-line elite veteran. Several other units of the Field Corps have the saying to describe these soldiers stationed at the Mukake military base: these people never take off their coats and shoes when sleeping at night. They must hold their guns in their arms and carry bullets. It must be loaded, and the suicide note has been written and stored in the mailbox. Although it is inevitably a bit exaggerated, the high vigilance of these soldiers can be seen from this sentence. Yes. It's not enough to send out a mobile reconnaissance company. Please give the general's order and the entire base will immediately enter a state of first-level combat readiness. Recall all combat units on duty outside the base, and at the same time request support from ARC and the fleet closest to here. This. Maginot originally wanted to say, this is too much of a mobilization of troops. According to the information he received, the large forces of the heretical sect should have been sent to the molten mine area. It is impossible to assemble a group of combat forces at this time. Come and attack the Mukake base. But then he thought again, what if the heretical sect really split up its forces? Or is the invasion of the molten mine area just a false shot, and the real target is the Mukake base where he is stationed? It is always right to be cautious, as the saying goes, be careful and you will sail forever. Maginot would rather be ridiculed as a coward by his colleagues afterwards than lose his life because of his negligence. Just do what you say, Maginot said. By the way, isn't there our outpost outside the base? Let the outpost send a few drones to the place where the convoy disappeared to see what is going on. General, not only has the signal of the convoy disappeared, but all 4 outposts in that direction have also lost contact. The major glanced down at the personal terminal strapped to the inside of his wrist and said solemnly, all 4 outposts have lost contact? I remember that the one closest to the base is only less than 20 kilometers away, right? Maginot frowned. At this distance, you can see it from the watchtower of the base. When we arrived, the sentry on duty at the top of the tower didn't see any movement. The sentry reported just 10 seconds ago and did not observe any abnormalities. What the hell? Maginot tugged at his collar irritably. There's nothing abnormal. How could the outpost lose contact? Is it electromagnetic interference? No electromagnetic interference was detected. The major replied, the 4 outposts lost contact in order according to their distance, with an interval of less than 3 seconds. Something is approaching the base quickly. P.S. Thanks to Xiao who stole melons for the 500 starting coins. Alien Relic Hunter author, and Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 526. The base. Does the base have any emergency measures? Maginot asked hurriedly. For some reason, he suddenly felt an unspeakable fear. Just after he asked this question, the ground shook violently, and a loud rumbling sound came from outside the office. The bone-spurred coffee cup with gold rims and crystal-like jade on the table swayed a few times like a drunkard, and then jumped off the table without hesitation. He fell to pieces. This is Lieutenant General Maginot's favorite piece in his private collection. This cup was made on Earth before the Ark was completed. Even in the old era, it can be considered a fine piece of porcelain. In order to get this cup, Lieutenant General Maginot spent 4 years of his salary, plus some unexplained gray income, before he successfully bought it at the auction. He even used his personal connections to bribe 4 appraisers from the auction house, asking them to mistakenly identify the cup as an imitation produced between 100 and 300 years of the new era. Otherwise, even if Chino's bid increases 5 times, he may not be able to win the auction. Collecting porcelain is a well-known hobby of Maginot. In his eyes, the white and delicate porcelain is like the delicate skin of a peerless beauty, and those exciting curves and glazes make people intoxicated. This coffee cup was often placed on the table by Maginot to show off, but he would never use it to serve coffee. Whenever a new officer was transferred to Maginot's staff, the veterans would tell him, "Newcomer, when you go to report to the lieutenant general, as long as you are inadvertently attracted to the coffee cup on the table, and then praise and ask a few questions, you can instantly increase the lieutenant general's favorability by several levels." This trick has been tried and tested, and Lieutenant General Maginot is also willing to introduce to his subordinates who are attracted by the cup what a precious piece of art it is. But now, this piece of art is broken. The Venus with its arms cut off can still be called a masterpiece, but the broken porcelain fragments scattered on the ground will not be appreciated by many people, even though it was once priceless. Silent moans came from Lieutenant General Maginot's throat, and he felt his heart bleeding, but just when he was tremblingly trying to sweep the debris on the ground together, the major he suddenly threw him to the ground, then took off the steel helmet hanging on the wall next to him, and buckled it on Maginot's head. "General, danger. Earthquake." "No." The base was attacked. Maginot realized what he was sitting on the ground and couldn't help but reach out to his waist. He first touched a pistol and was stunned for half a second. Then he threw the pistol aside and continued to fumble before finding his personal communication terminal, a special mobile phone for the commander, from the big pocket of his windbreaker. "Hello? Is this the guard camp? What happened outside? Report to me quickly." Maginot pressed a speed dial button, and the phone was immediately connected, and a burst of noisy voice came from the other end of the receiver. "Report, General. Inside the base, between the third wall and the fourth wall, a small-scale strong earthquake of unknown cause occurred. A section of nearly 100 meters of both walls collapsed, and the other 4 walls also collapsed. Various degrees of damage." The person on the other end of the phone paused, and then continued, "A deep pit with a diameter of about 80 meters appeared at the shaking point. The original location of the pit happened to be the hangar of the 1st Armored Battalion. The 1st Armored Battalion had 100%. 70 of the Mechas fell into the pit. The specific casualty data are still being calculated, but it is estimated that it will not be less than 200. Don't count the casualties yet. Let the entire base enter a state of first-level combat readiness. Let all the troops performing tasks outside rush back to support. Also, request reinforcements from ARC and the Air Force Fleet, and tell them that the Muka base has encountered unknown circumstances. Enemy attack. The situation is critical." Maginot repeated what the major said, but when the same words came out of his mouth, he added a bit of calmness and self-power. Although when he said this, he was still sitting on the ground in a somewhat funny posture, and the helmet on his head was still crooked. No matter how embarrassing the real situation is, a person who can climb to this position cannot be an idiot who can't do anything. Maginot has quickly fallen into his role. "General, it's no longer safe here. We have to go outside." The major helped Maginot up, and then put a composite light protective vest made of carbon fiber and Kevlar on the lieutenant general. On the body. This protective vest is already the largest model that can be found in the warehouse, but when it is put on Maginot's body, he still cannot zip up the front zipper. "Okay, let's go out." Maginot glanced at the debris on the ground for the last time, then stretched out his hand to straighten the helmet on his head. "By the way, Major, what's your name?" Levi Cruz. "I am the battalion commander of the 9th Infantry Battalion of the 7th Armored Mixed Division. I am responsible for the daily security of the base." "Major Levi." "No, it should be Colonel Levi. From now on, you are the colonel. In addition, you are no longer the commander of the infantry battalion, but my adjutant. In a few words, Maginot raised Levi's military rank by 2 levels. He is a lieutenant general, and this situation is a front-line promotion. These 2 sentences are still very effective, even if the merit is re-evaluated afterwards. The most he can do is to be demoted 1 level and promoted to lieutenant colonel. If this Colonel Levi, if he unfortunately dies in the attack, then the title of colonel is basically a certainty. However, Levi's face did not show any joy. He had stayed at the Mukok base for 4 full years, and the Mukok base was last breached exactly 4 years ago. He arrived at Mukok as the second batch of reinforcements. At that time, the remaining enemies had basically been wiped out, but the tragic images in the base were still deeply engraved in his memory. That time the garrison at Mukok base is also a mixed armored division, with about 11,000 people. However, when the casualties were finally counted, after excluding the missing, including the lightly and seriously injured, there were only 29 soldiers left in the entire division. Survivor. Of these 29 people, 6 died of their injuries after being returned to the Ark. To be precise, the number of survivors should be 23. Out of more than 11,000 people, 23 people survived. This does not include the casualties of the first batch of reinforcements. If the Mukok base was breached for the 12th time, Levi couldn't help but close his eyes hard, trying to put those horrific scenes behind him. P.S. Thanks to number 5 ball for the 100 starting coins. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, and Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 527. Just when Levi had just helped Lieutenant General Maginot outside the office, the 2 of them happened to see an unforgettable scene in their lives, a diameter of more than 50 meters, and the length of the exposed body alone was more than 100 meters. The giant centipede emerged from the collapsed pit and stood upright. If there are survivors at the reconnaissance team's support base who can see this scene, they will be surprised to find that the body of the centipede is more than 10 times larger than when it first appeared in front of humans. And this process only takes a few days. What kind of monster is this? Why have I never heard of this kind of thing? Is it an indigenous creature? Marshall asked nervously. Although he was trying his best to hide it, there was something deep in his words. The fear still showed up involuntarily. No, General, I'm afraid that's not an indigenous creature. Levi's face was sullen, his cheeks were pale, and he shook his head with some difficulty. That thing is a man-made monster. As if to verify what Levi said, the huge mouth on the top of the centipede suddenly opened, and countless pale meatballs rolled out of its mouth. Maginot took a closer look and discovered the white meat. The balls were actually a bunch of tentacles intertwined together, and when these tentacles landed on the ground, they began to squirm and struggle, like an octopus waking up from hibernation. It's the seed of corrosion. Maginot recognized it immediately. The one who attacked us is really a heretical sect. At the same time, Levi had grabbed the walkie-talkie and shouted, "Give the order. Open special ammunition depots number 7 to 9 to all soldiers. The enemies invading the base are the seeds of erosion from the heretical sect. All those who do not carry active ammunition on their bodies, soldiers, gather over there." Soldiers with active ammunition set up defensive positions on the spot to block the enemy. These things must not be allowed to cross the 5th wall. As Maginot's adjutant, Levi already had the authority to issue orders to the base garrison, even if this authority was only temporarily granted to him by Maginot. Where's the captain? Where are the 6 captains under me? Let them come to me immediately. Maginot, who came back to his senses, shouted to Levi. The commander of Mukok military base also serves as the commander of the 7th Armored Mixed Division of the base garrison. As a reinforced division, it has 4 combat regiments, an engineering regiment, and a logistics regiment, a total of 6 regiments. There are more than 10,000 people, and the leaders of these 6 regiments are the senior officers in the base, second only to Maginot. However, before Levi had time to ask, a hesitant voice came over the intercom. The 6 captains, the captains, We're just discussing the distribution of new models of mechas in the hangar. Hangar? Which hangar? Maginot and Levi were both stunned. Then, they looked blankly at the giant centipede, the big hole under its body. The voice with a hint of crying was still saying on the other end of the intercom, "That's it, it's the hangar that was attacked, the leader and the others were all trapped, no one came out, life or death is unknown." What uncertainty about life and death! In this situation, there can be no survivors at all. Maginot looked down at the battlefield below with some despair. He never imagined that the opponent's first round of raids would directly kill his middle-level commanders. "Something is not right, General," Levi said. "This is definitely not a coincidence. I don't believe that this attack was caused by luck. The heretical sect definitely had relevant information in advance. If I remember correctly, 2 days ago they had agreed to discuss this matter, but the meeting place had not yet been decided at that time. The 1st Regiment commander and the 2nd Regiment commander were still quarreling." Levi wanted to say that there might be spies from the heretic sect inside the base, but now was not the time to discuss this matter. "General, since the heretic sect's first target is the 6 group leaders, their next target is probably you. The office of the military director of Mukok base is located on a man-made hill made of concrete that is more than 60 meters high. Inside this hill, there is a metal frame with as many as 10 floors. There are metal partitions nearly half a meter thick in each room. Perhaps because it is too difficult to break through, the heretical sect did not regard this office as its primary target. Of course, it is not ruled out that the heretical sect has already known in advance that the military director of Muka base has been changed in the past few days. Compared to the generals who have just taken office, the 6th Regiment commanders are obviously more important. Once the battle starts, these middle-level leaders, the commander is the most threatening character to the heretical section, Levi thought to himself. "Attack me here." Maginot was so shocked by Levi's words that the fat on his face trembled twice. "Then what should we do?" The troops guarding the man-made hill are the security battalion directly under Maginot. Although this security battalion only has more than 200 people, it has 50 new mechas alone. It can definitely be regarded as the most powerful one in the entire Mukake base. A troop, but when Maginot cast his sights on the giant centipede in the distance, the little sense of security that the elite guard battalion brought him was gone. He doesn't want to die here, he can't die here, and he doesn't deserve to die here. Although he had not personally witnessed the tragic situation when Mukake base was breached, those shocking data could be viewed by any general-level officer. He did not even need to look up the actual photos. Just browsing through the series of numbers that take your breath away, you can picture the tragic scene in your mind. His strong desire to survive made him place his hope on the last straw he could grab, Colonel Levi, who had just been promoted to adjutant. "Levi, now, what should we do?" According to the emergency response regulations, if an enemy invades the base, whether it is an indigenous creature or a heretical sect, for the sake of safety, the military director of the base must immediately move to the backup command post located in the bunker. That is, the compartments in the concrete hill below them that are heavily protected by thick armor plates. However, considering that the enemy attacks from underground, the bunker is obviously no longer a safe place. Levi thought for a moment and then said, "Let's go to the tarmac." "Are you planning to let me leave the base?" Maginot was stunned, and immediately shook his head like a rattle. "No. This is absolutely not possible. As the military commander of Muka, I must not leave him at this time. Escape from the base alone." Although he was afraid of death, Maginot also knew what it meant to run away from battle, instead of being stripped of his military rank and all merits, then sentenced to death in a military court, and finally died in humiliation on the execution ground. Maginot would rather coexist and die with the base at least. This method of sacrifice can be considered glorious. Although during the decades he served in the garrison, Maginot became more and more yearning for fame and fortune, but as an ARC soldier, there are some things that have always been engraved deep in his heart, and after receiving the transfer order at that time, Even if he was unwilling to do so, he still had the consciousness he should have. Even if he died here today, he would never step out of the space. No, it's not escaping. Levi was stunned for half a second. Obviously, Maginot's attitude was a little beyond his expectation. The ground is no longer safe, but if you take a vehicle to a high altitude, it should be safe. It can avoid enemy attacks. It is more convenient for you, the general, to direct the overall battle from a higher position. You must not die, at least not until the base falls. Levi knew in his heart that if Maginot died, the situation would really be hopeless. Losing the commander would be a heavy blow to the morale of the soldiers, not to mention the inability to coordinate the command. A chaotic situation in which different troops are fighting on their own. He even made second-hand preparations. If General Maginot wanted to escape from the battle, he would shoot him directly, and then use Maginot's name to command the troops. As for the news of Maginot's murder, he will never announce it before the battle is over. Even if he would be held responsible later, he would not hesitate. But he was somewhat relieved that the new military chief, who seemed a little unqualified, didn't seem to be that bad. At least, he still retained the integrity that a soldier should have. Ah, yes. Hearing what Levi said, Maginot nodded repeatedly, and then said to the commander of the guard battalion waiting aside, "Let the guard battalion go into battle immediately. But, the top priority of the guard battalion is to protect your safety," the commander of the guard battalion said hesitantly. "Just have 2 people come out to protect me." "Anyway, there can't be so many people on the plane," Maginot said. "You are the strongest combat force in the base. Good steel should be used on the blade, not hidden in the blade in the sheath." After saying this, Maginot held the steel on his head and ran quickly towards the apron, guarded by several soldiers. The tarmac is not far from his office, only more than 300 meters, but for Maginot, who has not exercised all year round, it is like running a marathon. When he rushed to the tarmac out of breath, he stopped. All the aircraft here have taken off to support the battle, except for a large helicopter left specifically for him. Maginot, Levi, and several soldiers from the guard battalion quickly boarded the helicopter, and the rotating blades began to make a loud noise, but the helicopter was less than 2 meters away from the ground when a louder explosion came from the office at the top of the hill. The loud noise even covered up the sound of the nearby paddles, causing Maginot's cochlea to buzz. "Oh my God!" A soldier couldn't help but swallowed. "I remember that the protective steel plate of the bunker was nearly half a meter thick, right? And there are 12 whole floors." Another soldier said. Maginot couldn't help feeling that his hands and feet were freezing. If he were still standing on the top of the mountain, he would probably be a pile of rotten meat by now, right? "Levi." He turned his head and looked at the adjutant beside him. "General. You also know, I was transferred from the garrison. To be honest, I still haven't figured out the purpose of this transfer order, but this is the meaning above, and I can't make any assumptions, but I have to be honest with you about one thing." "You said it," Levi nodded. "Actually, I don't have any command experience in a base offensive and defensive battle like this," Maginot said. "Maybe, no, not maybe, but definitely, any one of the 6 captains will definitely be better than I am strong. But they are all gone now. I hope you can lead this battle instead of me. Can you do it?" Maginot looked at Levi with a hint of hope. The other party was a veteran who had been in this base for 4 years. In terms of combat experience, he was better than him, a general who sat in the office every day reviewing and approving documents. Levi hesitated for a second, then nodded vigorously. "I'll try my best." "Thank you, I leave everything to you. Don't have any scruples." "I will take full responsibility," Maginot said solemnly. At the same time, inside the ancient battleship Yagonactor, there was the power room. The reconnaissance team hanging on the floor endured nearly 30 seconds of acceleration before the huge force pressing on them disappeared, and the ships originally tilted upward gradually returned to level. The battleship rushed out of the magma pool. Are we, are we above the molten mine area now? The hound rubbed his chest and asked breathlessly. That should be it, it's a pity that I can't see outside. As soon as Lighton finished speaking, a circle of phantoms like holographic projections suddenly appeared around him. Everyone took a closer look and saw that it was the lead gray clouds above the mining area. As if he thought of something, Layton immediately spoke, and then shouted, "Look at the bottom of your feet. There is also a shadow on the floor, or in other words, the floor itself has become a shadow, and everyone seems to be suspended in the air, with a panoramic view of the molten mine area directly below. Those flowing magma rivers, smoking fissures, interlocking fractured plates, even the heretical sect troops walking through the mining area can be seen clearly. And those people on the ground also saw the giant thing suspended in the sky. I don't know why, but even though the influence of those people is smaller than a grain of rice, the hound can still see the horrified look on their faces. Damn. It's a heretic sect. Those are humans wearing protective suits. There are also erosion seeds. Look, over there, and over there, they are all mutants. Oh my God, there are so many of them, the hound exclaimed. Kaylan? Kaylan? Can you hear me? Is there any usable weapon on this battleship? It can hit those guys on the ground. Damn, we are forced like a sewer by these guys like the rats in the house. Now it's our turn to fight back. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 528. Even the reconnaissance team can see the enemy below, and Kaylan, whose mind is completely connected to the battleship, can naturally see it too. Not only can he see, but he can also use the battleship's own auxiliary devices to lock on all targets at the same time, a total of 2,615 enemy units, including 1,190 humans, 1,421 containers and mature seeds of erosion, and 4 unknown targets. The operation manual of this battleship seemed to have been input into Ian's mind along with the huge flow of information, although he was still in a state of knowing nothing about this battleship before connecting to the console. But when he started to actually operate it, everything became easier. It was as if he had been operating this battleship for years. It's as if this is not a battleship, but a car that he has personally assembled and driven countless times. The tightness of the accelerator and clutch, the angle and number of turns of the steering wheel, the gearbox of the gearbox and the speed of the engine, everything. He doesn't need to think about everything, or even pay attention to the readings on the dial. He can complete a series of extremely difficult operations just by relying on muscle memory. If the integration of man and sword is the highest state of swordsmanship, then the integration of man and ship is probably the highest state of ship maneuvering, right? Of course, the ship maneuvering mentioned here refers to controlling the battleship, and it is definitely not what players are thinking about in those games with human-like battleships. Although Ian's 5 senses have been completely isolated from the surroundings, he can hear what the hounds and others are saying through the observation perspective inside the battleship. If possible, of course he also wants to annihilate these enemies in the molten mine area. There are no innocent people in heretical sections, whether they are those who join voluntarily or those who are forced to join under coercion and inducement. Since they have become a member of this organization, their hands must be stained with the blood of the same kind. Kaylan saw a piece of information in the archives of the Security Bureau. If ordinary people want to join a heretical sect, after passing the preliminary review, they must submit a voucher in order to officially obtain the status of a congregant. The weight of this letter of surrender also determines the person's high status after joining the heretical sect. The basic surrender certificate is to hunt down an exile who is unwilling to convert to the great God. The simplest one is to capture slaves who go out to collect food. Of course, if you have sufficient resources, you can even go to a certain place. In the exile camp, People spend money to buy a slave back, and then offer it as a human sacrifice to the great god. As for the more advanced certificates of surrender, they are to attack various strongholds and transfer stations of Ark, and use the kills obtained in the battle as their own certificates of surrender. As for the most advanced certificates of surrender, they naturally have to be those who are lurking. Those important characters who are at the top of Ark and carry out the conspiracy secretly, but the identities of the latter are rarely disclosed. Even if some exposed chess pieces are cleared by the Security Bureau, they will arrange other charges for these people. Killing these people will not make Kaylan feel any guilt in his heart. Weapon system, poof, why it's all grey. When the idea of attack came to Ian's mind, a dense list appeared in front of him instantly. Although the names of the weapons on the battleship were automatically translated into human languages, they were all Ian's names. The names were incomprehensible, but just by looking at them, he knew that these things were real big killers. For example, the star-splitting position generation device ranked first and the gravity distortion anchor ranked second. Although Kaylan had no idea what the actual effects of these weapons were, he followed the association of these unclear names. A large amount of cold sweat broke out on his back instantly. The astral disintegration stance sounds like it should be specially used to deal with planets. Then this thing should be similar to the Star Destroyer cannon commonly seen in science fiction works, right? I just don't know what level of stars this thing can annihilate. During the trial in the bottomless sinkhole, Kaylan knew that the Alpha civilization was equipped with star-annihilating weapons. If Ian's trial mission failed, the star-annihilating weapons would be activated and destroy the crown of ashes destroyed together with the asteroid. The asteroid Ashes is not an ordinary asteroid. After being devoured many times, its size and mass are already very close to the threshold of a dwarf planet. To destroy such a star is as difficult as destroying the Earth. The satellite moon had 1/3 of its volume blown away. The dwarf planet data here are based on Pluto, which is 1/6 the size of the moon and 1/3 the mass of the moon. But the civilization that built this ancient battleship is obviously stronger than the Alpha civilization. Their star-killing weapons should not only be used on asteroids or dwarf planets. Kaylan feels that this thing must be able to blow up a planet like Alpha Star. If it can even kill stars, then this thing should be regarded as a strategic weapon even for this third civilization. However, there are 45 weapons in the entire list, and each weapon's name is gray, that is, none of them are in a usable state. After digesting part of the information flow, Kaylan has already guessed why the Alpha civilization soaked this battleship in the magma pool. All the weapons on the battleship require a massive amount of energy to activate, and they can be charged in a conventional way. Even if the entire civilization's wealth is wiped out, the battleship's energy cannot be fully charged. The astral splitting stand generation device, the number 1 weapon, requires 90% of the energy in the full state to activate once. So Alpha civilization simply sank the battleship into the magma pool and let it absorb Alpha Star's geothermal energy, but what made Kaylan a little speechless was that this thing had been soaked in the magma pool for 10,000 years at least. The charging progress is only a pitiful 6%. Based on this efficiency, if you want to launch a Star Destroyer cannon, wouldn't you have to soak in a magma pool for 150,000 years? But then again, compared with the lifespan of a planet that can easily be billions of years, 150,000 years can only be regarded as a passing time, but for a civilization, 150,000 years is too much. A little longer. At least the Alpha civilization could not wait until the battleship was fully charged. Kaylan looked at the weapon with the smallest energy consumption on the list, which also required 10% of the energy. He always felt that even the least powerful weapon on this battleship would be enough to uproot the entire molten mine area. There are no usable weapons, then we can probably only use the hull of the battleship as a weapon and use physical attacks, then triggering a high-intensity earthquake should be able to kill all the heretical sects in the mining area, but this way first, the old dogs and the others without the protection of the light curtain would probably be shocked to death inside the battleship. Kaylan quickly thought about the countermeasures. If weapons are not effective, then other things. Kaylan focused on another tool list that popped up. A name caught his attention: bioorganic matter extractor. Although Kaylan couldn't determine where this thing came from and what it did, he found that this thing could actually lock on 2,615 targets at the same time. Taking it literally, it seems that organic matter can be collected from living organisms, so if the collection efficiency is maximized, can people be sucked into a skeleton instantly? Moreover, the energy consumed to activate this thing is almost negligible for ancient warships. The only limitation is that the extractor only has 3 storage units. That is to say, before the organic matter extracted last time is digested, he only had 3 engine sessions. Anyway, there are 3 chances, let's just treat it as an experiment. With this idea in mind, Kaylan started the extractor for the 2,516 targets that were locked. As for the power of the extractor, for insurance purposes, he directly set it to the maximum. In an instant, 2,516 threads invisible to the naked eye were shot from the battleship, connecting all the locked targets and extractors. The next second, these invisible dotted lines were already covered with crimson, replaced by a solid line. At that time, the extremely fine flesh and blood was transported to the storage unit along these lines, and the targeted target had all the blood drained from his body before he could even cry out before death. Organic matter. Human beings or vessels can still more or less have a broken skeleton riddled with holes, while those boneless eroded species are like slugs that have been evaporated by high temperatures, leaving only pools of clear water. The liquid was vaporized by the hot rocks in the blink of an eye and mixed into the rising smoke. Although Kaylan had been mentally prepared to a certain extent, the actual effect of the extractor still made him lose consciousness for a moment. This thing, used to deal with living creatures, is clearly a superkiller weapon that cannot be defended. None of the exiles wearing power armor survived. They were like a can that had been cut open from the inside. The flesh and blood pulled by an unknown force directly drilled a hole in the surface of the hard composite armor. As for the rest of the reconnaissance team, they fell into unparalleled shock. The silence lasted for a full 2 minutes before Layton asked in a difficult voice, "What just happened? Did anyone see clearly?" "I'm not sure," Ivan whispered, holding the wrist of his other hand tightly with his prosthetic limb. "I seemed to see a thin red line appearing on those people, and then, their skin, hair, flesh, and internal organs all disappeared, only their skeletons remained. Only the skeletons of humans are left, and those monsters don't even have any scum left," Swilajito added. When Kaylan came to his senses from his brief absence, he couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. Only 2,512 of the 2,516 targets were eliminated, and 4 unknown targets escaped. But even though these 4 unknown targets are not dead yet, their bodies have been shattered and can no longer maintain their original shapes. Kaylan noticed that one of the 4 unknown targets was actually wearing the elite weapon. The squad's standard armor. Did he accidentally injure a friendly force? No, it's not a friendly force. The body of the soldier has been broken into 2 parts, including the armor and body. All the organic matter in the lower half of the body has been lost, and only the upper body still retains a part of flesh and blood. A normal person would be dead long ago after being seriously injured by this, but the upper body of the soldier is still struggling and twisting, and fleshy tentacles stained with blood and filth are constantly growing out of the sections of the body, trying to fill those shocking wounds. His upper body was like wood eaten by termites, covered with dense holes, and the right side of his chest collapsed completely. A large amount of blood flowed out of the broken body, and was then covered by the ground. Evaporation. He was indeed one of the soldiers left by Kaylan on the outskirts of the mining area, but he was no longer a human being at this moment. Kaylan couldn't help but feel sad. It seemed that the support base had fallen. Just when Kaylan focused his attention on the mutilated body, the other party's head turned slightly to one side, and his eyes behind the transparent mask met Ian's gaze. "Can you feel my sight?" Kaylan asked tentatively. "You must know that he is currently using the battleship's external observation system to peer into the entire mining area. If the other party can feel his sight, then his consciousness, you should be able to communicate with it too." As expected, the soldier also used his consciousness to say to Kaylan, "Why, your consciousness was not swallowed up by the battleship. Are you a prophet?" Kaylan felt that he could basically determine the identity of this guy. "You are his substitute, right? There are 3 other people, and they are all the same. You are really willing to give up? It's expensive. We only sent out 1 stand-in during the trip to the sick village, but this time we sent out 4 at once." However, the person on the other side did not take Ian's words, but said to himself, "You can't survive. If you want to completely restart the system, even if you drain all your mental power, it won't be enough. You should now." He is a living dead person. The prophet's stand-in suddenly paused, and after 2 seconds, he suddenly said, "You must have integrated the complete holy object, otherwise, there is no reason for you to still maintain your own consciousness." "What exactly is the holy object?" Kaylan asked. He didn't intend to tell the other party what happened on the Greek ship. Since this guy likes to guess, let him guess. He is not the kind of chatty villain in movies who has to tell all his secrets before taking action. Most of those people have an almost perverted desire for expression, and now, Kaylan just wants him to die. "Where did you find the complete sacred object? Hasn't the semi-finished product been destroyed?" The substitute's consciousness was filled with anger and confusion. It seems that this guy's stand-in does not have the ability to share information in real time. Otherwise, before the stand-in was killed last time, the prophet should have known that the half-finished product was still alive and above the sick village. Of course, it is not ruled out that the special environment of the sick village, or the abilities of Chiron, Z-Logo, and the puppet individuals interfered with the avatar's information sharing ability. You should be able to find out this by asking Z-Logo after you return. As for the pile of rotten meat in front of me, I probably can't ask anything more. For their sake, it was not worth wasting another opportunity to use the extractor. Kaylan thought about it and began to slowly lower the floating height of the battleship. At the same time, he reminded the entire reconnaissance team to be prepared for impact through the sound transmission device in the battleship. "Kaylan, what are you going to do?" Hound asked with some horror. "If it just wipes across the ground, it shouldn't cause a high-intensity earthquake, right?" Kaylan said to the stand-in. "Wait a minute. I want to make a deal with you. Even if you want to destroy my substitute, let me say something first. Before the prophet's substitute could finish his words, the bottom of the battleship had already touched the ground. A huge roar suddenly sounded. PS Thanks to Minya Kazang and LYG for the 1,500 starting coins. Thank you to Bookfriend 2021030110413040595 for the 600 starting coins. Thank you Sunyi for the 500 starting coins. Thank you number 5 Ball for the 333 starting coins. Thank you in a hurry Huangdo and Aju are the 100 starting coins rewarded by the Angel Alien Relic Hunter author, and Chenmi-san. Chapter 529. Although the huge roar echoed through the sky, Kaylan still vaguely heard a small but crisp click sound. That was the sound of bones being crushed. He couldn't be sure whether this was his hallucination, or whether the ancient battleship's sound collection device was too outrageous. In short, when the battleship ran over the ground, the consciousness from the prophet's stand-in completely disappeared. The last thing it left for Kaylan was an extremely spiteful thought. Just like when the villain in the movie was forced into a desperate situation, he cursed the protagonist with harsh words such as not to have a good death and not to be reborn forever. But Kaylan doesn't care about the prophet's curse. Anyway, in this guy's plan, he is a victim. Since he originally wanted to kill himself, Kaylan doesn't have to worry about offending the other person to death. Anyway, one of them is going to be killed, so why not just kill you? If you have too many debts, you don't have to worry. If you have too many lice, you don't need to itch. That's the truth. What's more, the positions of both sides are inherently hostile. This hostile relationship is different from the political games between countries in the old era. This is a kind of ideological opposition that is almost endless. If we were to use a metaphor, perhaps the religious wars in the Middle Ages would be closer. In those dark ages, wars between lords and lords often did not kill knights with status. Instead of forging a blood feud, it is better to use prisoners in exchange for ransom and land, and by the way, sell a favor to the other party, and the war between religions can only be described as a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. Like massacres of cities, inhumane tragedies like the Great Purge are commonplace. The other party wanted Kaylan dead, and Kaylan also didn't want to leave a way for the other party to survive. He directly activated the energy shield of the battleship, and in an instant, the remains of the Prophet's double and a layer of rock more than 5 meters thick were instantly vaporized, leaving not even a trace of ashes. This is the one-stop service of a professional team, in the true sense of breaking the bones and raising the ashes, Kaylan thought in his heart, and raised the battleship into the air again. When activating the energy shield, Kaylan found that his perspective changed from the first-person perspective of the battleship to the third-person God's perspective, and the true appearance of this ancient battleship was finally fully presented in his mind. In front of you. Unlike Noah's Ark, which is disc-shaped and resembles a flying saucer, Yagunactor is shaped like a huge water droplet lying horizontally. The diameter of the head is dozens of kilometers, and the diameter of the tail is it suddenly gathered into a cone. Although this shape seems a bit top-heavy, the streamlined appearance and the smooth mirror-like shell unexpectedly fit Kaylan's aesthetics, especially the 3 blue halos that change in size around the tail, which are full of aura. An indescribable sense of mystery and beauty. The only flaw is that near the end, an area looks pitted, like metal corroded by strong acid. This location should be where the Alpha civilization mined nano alloy. But if it is cut with a tool, it should not leave such traces. Could it be that not only those crystal pillars, but also the outer shell of the battleship cast by nano alloy has the ability to automatically repair? If this is the case, then why has Alpha civilization studied this battleship for so long and failed to figure out the synthesis formula of nano alloy? Isn't this too embarrassing? It is said that all the enemies in the molten mine area have been wiped out. What should we do next? Should we go looking for the ruins of the garrison base or simply drive this ancient warship back to the Ark? In terms of value alone, this battleship is definitely worth 1,000 garrison bases, or even more. No, you shouldn't compare a small garrison base with this battleship. In a sense, the value of this battleship is even higher than the Ark. For a moment, the idea flashed through Kaylan's mind, relying on this battleship, breaking away from the Ark, and establishing a completely independent organization. However, this idea was quickly rejected by himself. Not to mention whether the Hounds and others will agree with his idea, what will happen to the members of the hunting group, Zofia, and a series of other people related to them who stayed on the Ark. Just survive alone. This rigid condition was enough to make Kaylan give up the idea. This ancient warship is very powerful, but without any logistical support, its own weapons cannot be used at all. Kaylan has made very little progress in exploring it. It is completely unknown how much combat power it can exert. In addition, the energy reserves are not large, and it needs to face pressure from both the heretical sect and the Ark. Kaylan cannot be sure how long the battleship itself can last. Once the energy is exhausted, even if Kaylan can sink it into the magma pool again, the long recharging time is simply not something he can afford. As for seizing the Ark by force, don't even think about it. Few peasant uprisings were successful in ancient times, let alone the complex and sophisticated modern society. Even if he could kill the undead crew members and replace them, he has no ability to completely bring the Ark under his control. The Emperor also had to work hard to check and balance the relationship and power between the powerful and his ministers. How could a person who climbed to the top by force be able to convince the public? Besides, this force does not belong to him, but comes from a foreign object like the ancient battleship. Lan conducted dozens of deductions in his mind, but the results of each deduction proved that leaving the Ark at this stage would lead to death. On the contrary, if you join a heretical sect, you might still have a slight chance of survival. But this is completely contrary to Ian's own wishes. After careful consideration, Lan decided to take the battleship back to the Ark first. A Gunakotaur is undoubtedly a great weapon, but now he is far from being qualified and capable of mastering this great weapon. Ability. It would be better to complete the assessment mission of the Immortal Crew Association first, find a way to become one of them, and make a decision before taking action. This is the safest way. At the same time, Ark, the core area. Central restricted area. Conference Hall 1. This is a room that is completely in darkness. There is no lighting equipment installed in the entire conference hall, only the holographic image projected on the round platform in the center of the conference hall, emitting a faint cold light. The thing in the holographic image was a huge drop-shaped battleship. The tail of the battleship was surrounded by 3 halos of different sizes, floating quietly just above the round platform. In the darkness, a red light quietly lit up, like a flickering will-o'-the-wisp, suspended in mid-air about 2 meters above the ground. Through the gleam of light projected by the holographic projection, you can vaguely see that it is a black cabinet standing on the ground, shaped like a coffin. If there is a person lying in this coffin, then this red light, the position should exactly correspond to his eyes. He found Yagunactor, and he successfully activated the battleship before that person. Do you feel a little unexpected? The red light flashed twice, and an old male voice sounded, echoing in the huge conference hall. Maybe he's just lucky. Opposite the first red light, nearly 100 meters away, another red light also lit up, but the voice seemed much younger and sounded like he is a young boy who is not yet 20 years old. I originally thought that the most he could do was discover the existence of Yagunactor. Being able to escape the molten mine alive and return to the Ark would be his limit. The second voice continued, from this point of view, he is better than that person. Luck is also a part of strength, we always think so. The third red light, the third voice, this is a woman, with an elegant and pleasant voice like a famous lady. But luck is not stable. People who rely on luck can hardly go far, the second voice retorted. In the face of the established facts, there is no point in arguing about these things, said the old voice who was the first to speak. What we should discuss now is how to deal with him. Although I hate people with good luck, the young man's voice said, but I don't hate him. I think we can proceed as planned. Second, the lady said. Original plan, a fourth voice joined in, this was the voice of an octogenarian woman. Do you really want him to join us and replace the dying Chiron? Why not? This is the fifth voice. This voice has almost no emotion, and even the gender is difficult to identify. That person's progress has far exceeded our expectations. We need a sharp blade, and he is our best option. Indeed, the second voice spoke again, letting him join us is the best way to gain his trust. But the fourth voice seemed hesitant. If he knows the truth, will he take an extreme action? By then, do you still think you can control him? Then just don't let him know, the lady said. The truth only exists in your memories. Even if he has obtained the same authority as us, as long as you all keep your mouth shut, how can he know those things? By the way, the Muka base was attacked. He and Yagunactor are the only units that can provide timely support. Do you want him to go? Asked the first old voice. I think it's okay. It's just a good time to try out the power of this new toy, the second voice said. Besides, even if we don't let him go, he will save people, right? This man still has a sense of justice in his bones. Of. The sense of justice is a rare quality, the lady commented, although. She did not continue, and everyone else also remained silent at this time. Over the molten mine area, the ancient battleship Yagonactor, inside the power room. At the moment when the Prophet's 4 stand-ins were eliminated, everyone in the reconnaissance team suddenly discovered that the shielding field that originally shrouded the entire molten mine area had suddenly disappeared. At the same time that the shielding field disappeared, everyone in the reconnaissance team received the highest priority request for help. The Hound lowered his head and glanced at the content of the request for help, and his expression suddenly changed. Something happened at the Muka base. The heretical sect created a super monster and broke through the base's defense circle directly from the ground. The two sides are currently fighting fiercely, but the situation is not allowed. Be optimistic, the base could fall at any time. Muka base? That is a super fortress. More than 10 million tons of molten steel were poured into the foundation alone. How could it be breached from the ground by a heretical sect? Layton exclaimed. You will know after you click on the message and take a look at it, Hound said with a sullen face. There are photos and videos in the attachment. Layton immediately opened the video attached to the request for help. A few seconds later, he once again exclaimed, "Oh my God, what the hell is this? Don't ask us, I believe everyone here has never seen this monster," the Hound said. "I guess it is a new biological weapon that the heretic sect dug out some good things from the ruins and then manufactured it. With this thing, except for the Ark, it is impossible to defend all the strongholds on Alpha Planet," Layton said. "If you want to annihilate this thing, I'm afraid you have to mobilize the main fleet." "Where is the main fleet closest to Muka base?" Hound looked at Aya and asked. "It's the 3rd Fleet," Aya replied, "but it will take at least 5 hours for the 3rd Fleet to reach Muka." 5 hours? The Hound pursed his lips hard. "Let alone 5 hours, I don't think they can last even 1 hour. I'm afraid we are the only ones who can save them." "Us? Are you planning to use this battleship to support Mukake base?" Aya was stunned for a moment, then said seriously, "I reject this proposal. Our first priority is to safely return this battleship Ark, instead of throwing it into a dangerous battlefield without authorization. This matter has exceeded the autonomous authority of the reconnaissance team. Even if you are the commander, Kaylan, I can't obey your order this time." She paused and said decisively, "We must give priority to the escort mission of Yagonactor." "Fart. There are more than 10,000 people in that base. We are the only ones who can save them. Are you going to let us die without saving you?" The Hound pulled off the ammunition bag from his waist and threw it down angrily. "On the ground, you people from the Security Bureau have never put the lives of ordinary people and ordinary soldiers in your eyes. I really want to save them. If conditions permit, I will never leave them alone," Aya shouted sternly. "But have you considered the importance of this battleship? If it falls into the hands of a heretic sect, the losses will be far more than just these 10,000 people. Can you afford this responsibility?" The originally relaxed atmosphere between the two sides suddenly became tense. The 3 agents standing behind Aya subconsciously put their hands on their weapons, while the Hound stared at them angrily and clenched their hands. His fists kept making clucking sounds. Layton took a step forward and protected the Hound behind him, while Akira Asano casually turned to the side and gently placed his thumb on the sword. Just when the smell of gunpowder in the air gradually became stronger, Kei Ian's voice suddenly echoed throughout the entire power room. "Leader Brita, anyway, the signal shielding has been lifted now. You can ask your superiors for instructions to see if they allow this support operation." Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chenmi-san. Chapter 530. "There is no need," Aya said sternly. "As soon as the communication was restored, I reported the situation here to my superiors, and the reply I received was that the ancient battleship Yagonactor must be escorted back first." Ark. Shit, Hound punched hard. if your bastard superior was in that base, I don't believe he could say this. Just when Hound was thinking about whether he should take some coercive measures to make these guys from the Security Bureau submissive, Aya's expression suddenly changed slightly and she took out her personal communication terminal from her pocket. An orange indicator light on the side of the machine was flashing rhythmically, indicating that there was an unread message that had just been sent to her mailbox. Aya's finger lightly swiped on the screen, and after just one glance, her expression instantly became strange. "What's wrong? Is your superior planning to send a pilot fleet to escort us? Are you afraid that we will take the wrong route?" Hound asked in a sinister tone. The superior said, "Let us." Aya bit her lip and said stiffly, "Let us use the Yagonactor to rush to the Muka military base." Huh. Hearing the news, the Hound was stunned. He stared at Aya's evasive eyes for a few seconds. After confirming that what the other party said was not a joke, he laughed loudly. "Ha ha 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 ha, I didn't expect it." The slap in the face came so quickly. It was really a naked slap in the face, and it made such a loud slap. I don't know why, but I suddenly felt that the upper leadership structure of the Security Bureau was not that bad. It's pleasing to the eye, ha 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 ha. Mukok military base. 15 minutes had passed since the attack began. The giant centipede has spit out at least 200 erosion seeds from its mouth, and 1/3 of these erosion seeds are B-type mutants with extremely powerful combat capabilities. The first blocking line established by the base defenders was almost broken within just 10 seconds of contact with these monsters. Active ammunition requires special storage devices, so in addition to the troops who go outside the base to perform tasks, soldiers usually do not carry active ammunition with them. Conventional weapons may be able to block the advancement of ordinary erosion seeds, but when faced with Type B mutants whose strength, speed, and defense capabilities are several times that of ordinary erosion seeds, their effect is very limited. These biochemical weapons specifically designed for killing can even withstand direct fire from the main battle tank's 130mm cannon at close range, and their tentacles with countless suction cups can even tear open heavy-powered armor with brute force. That composite breastplate is 25mm thick. The first blocking line lasted even 1 minute before completely collapsing. None of the soldiers who stayed to block these monsters survived. Even if there were some wounded who were not killed on the spot, their bodies had already been eroded. Cell invaded, even if the final winner of this battle was Ark's side, their comrades had to tearfully execute these injured soldiers. To this day, seed of corrosion infection is still a terminal disease for humans. Even if a very small number of infected people successfully eliminate all the alienated cells in the body, they are unreplicable cases. What's more, ordinary people soldiers are not qualified to enjoy the treatment of the medical branch of the Institute, unless a very special mutation occurs in their bodies. The madmen in the Institute may pay attention to these people, but if this is the case, their fate is probably to become experimental subjects on the dissecting table, rather than treatment objects. Kaylan also thought about announcing the discovery of the stalagmite fragments. Although he had many ways to conceal the true origin of the stalagmites, that weird island was not something you could just go to if you wanted to. It was also something that was difficult to replicate. Resources: Kaylan would rather leave the few stalagmite fragments on hand to his own people. Especially after they have become mortal enemies with the heretical sect, the chance of encountering the seeds of corrosion will inevitably increase greatly. From a certain point of view, these stalagmite fragments are like resurrection coins. Although they cannot really be expected to use them to save lives, but at least it can greatly improve the team's survival rate and fault tolerance rate. Retreat quickly. Get behind the fifth wall, a warrant officer shouted to his soldiers. We can't fight them here. We will be killed by these monsters. We have to rely on defenses. Go to the fifth wall, condescending pawns. Take a few people and hurry to the ammunition depot. We need active ammunition. The warrant officer had thrown away all the spare magazines and grenades on his body, and even took off his helmet and armor over his combat uniform. Anyway, conventional bullets would not cause harm to these monsters, and the helmet and protective gear can't block their attacks, so it's better to go into battle lightly, which can make you faster and more flexible. Warrant officer. McCarthy and the others are entangled by those monsters. The brothers who are responsible for cutting off the rear are bitten by the enemy and cannot escape. I have to save them. The middleman who was named by the warrant officer Spence roared at the top of his lungs. He stood on the roof of an armored vehicle that had been abandoned by its crew, and kept firing at the rear with the large caliber machine gun on board. Shell casings as thick as a thumb had piled up in a thick layer at his feet. Save them. What are you going to use to save them? The warrant officer said angrily. You don't even have humming active ammunition. Can you kill those things? What do you want to use? Scratch with your fingernails? Or bite with your teeth? But there are more than 20 brothers who are left behind. I can't just watch them die here, less than 100 meters away from us. Pang cried with a cry. He felt like there was something wrong with him. Some liquid got into my eyes, burning the corners of my eyes. I don't know if it was sweat or tears. The camp they just rushed out of is full of 2 to 4-story soldier dormitories. The terrain is relatively complex. Street fighting in the camp can greatly delay the advancement of the erosion seeds, and the effect is better than the blocking line in the open area. Much better, but the biggest problem is that, after the large troops successfully withdraw to the fifth wall, it is basically impossible for these soldiers who voluntarily stayed to break up the rear to come out of the camp. Pawns. I say it again. Take your people to the ammunition depot quickly, the warrant officer said through gritted teeth. I'll save McCarthy and the others. What did you say? Sergeant Pons turned around in disbelief and looked at the warrant officer behind him. The warrant officer had already thrown away the assault rifle without the magazine in his hand, picked up a light machine gun from the ground, and kicked another one away. Box of bullets, pulled out the bullet chain inside, and wrapped it around his body. If Kaylan were here, he would definitely find that the current appearance of this warrant officer is very similar to the protagonist Rambo in the classic old movie First Blood. I said. Damn you. Take people to the ammunition depot. I will save people. But, warrant officer, you said it yourself, ordinary bullets can't kill those monsters. That gun in your hand. There was a hint of hesitation on Pons' face. He suddenly felt that this might be the last time he spoke to the warrant officer. Although the warrant officer is an old guy who often secretly drinks the wine he hides in the shoe cabinet, and also likes to curse, the soldiers under his opponent are actually pretty good. Their team followed the warrant officer at Mukake Base after serving for 2.5 years. There has never been a single casualty. This is something worthy of boasting in the entire field army. But just a few minutes ago, this record of 0 casualties that had been maintained for 2.5 years was broken. Pons could see clearly that the dozen or so people in Payne's team were directly overwhelmed by a large group of erosion seeds, and now, Team McCarthy is back. He wanted to tell the warrant officer that he should forget it, if he failed to rescue McCarthy and the others and got himself involved again, but he couldn't say this. Are you an idiot? I didn't say I wanted to kill those things, I just went to rescue people. The warrant officer glared at him fiercely. Quickly, get out of that car. If you don't want to see if you want us to die, hurry up and bring us the active ammunition. The warrant officer stepped forward quickly, pulled Pons out of the armored vehicle, then opened the driver's door and sat in. Follow me. Go to the ammunition depot. Pons took one last look at the activated armored vehicle, gritted his teeth and ran towards the ammunition depot with several of his soldiers. Damn it, if I stayed in this damn place for another 2 months, I could go to the rear and retire comfortably, but this happened to me. It seems that I am destined to be in trouble. I can't escape even if I want to. The warrant officer muttered to himself as he started the car, stepped on the accelerator, and the armored vehicle knocked over several boxes blocking the road and rushed into the camp. If everything goes well, as long as McCarthy and the others can be found, it will only take a few minutes to pull them out with the car. The speed of ordinary erosion seeds cannot catch up with wheeled armored vehicles. As for mutants, I can only pray that I never encounter them. The road conditions in the camp are very bad, according to the construction plan of Mukake Base. Even in the dormitory camp, in order to improve the assembly efficiency, the roads in the camp must meet the conditions for large vehicles to pass. But now, in order to stop those monsters, many artillery shells fell into the camp, and many buildings were blown down. The level of chaos was no less than that of the ruins of the ruined Alpha City. Damn it, these blind artillerymen. They're all just working together. Finally, after driving more than 100 meters into the camp, the access road was completely blocked by a collapsed 3-story building. I thought to cross the obstacle, the only way is to install several high-power rocket thrusters on the chassis of this armored vehicle and fly directly over the ruins. The warrant officer cursed and stepped on the brake, pushed open the door and jumped out. Within 2 steps, he saw the body of a friendly soldier buried under the rubble. Damn it, the monster couldn't be killed by the explosion, and even injured one of our own. If you can come back alive and let me know who the guy who fired the gun is, I will twist off this bastard's head and stuff it into the humming pion inside. The warrant officer only took one look and knew that this guy was dead and completely hopeless. In the past, the bodies of friendly troops would have to be recovered by some means, but now the battle is far from over, and the situation is changing. It's getting worse. They can barely care about the living, let alone the dead. But before the warrant officer had taken a few steps, he suddenly turned around and quickly returned to the body. Only a forearm of the body was exposed, and the dark gray uniform cuffs were stained with lime. This is not the uniform of their field corps, this is the uniform of the Special Forces of the Security Bureau. After confirming the identity of the deceased, the warrant officer couldn't help but feel a little excited. Ordinary soldiers would not carry active bullets with them when they stayed in the base, but this group of guys from the Security Bureau were different. This base was safe. The number of people in the Bureau is only 1% of the regular field force, but their active ammunition quota accounts for 1/2 of the entire quota of the entire Mukake military base. Perhaps because they have too much money, these people from the Security Bureau have no sense of wasting resources. Generally, active ammunition can only be stored for 10 to 15 days at most after being taken out of a special storage device. If they do not receive field missions during this period, this batch of active ammunition will basically be considered scrapped. Despite this, they will always have several magazines filled with active ammunition on them. The warrant officer took a sapper shovel from the armored vehicle and pried off the rubble on the body. Sure enough, in the body's pocket, he found a 0.45-inch combat pistol and a magazine with a yellow and black biological hazard marking. Brother, what a timely help! The warrant officer glanced at the corpse's face, then pulled off the dog tag hanging around the other person's neck and stuffed it into his pocket. No matter what, at least he is now more or less capable of fighting against the seed of corrosion. But God seemed to want to play a little joke on him. The warrant officer holding the pistol just turned a corner and saw 3 erosion seeds lying on the ground, devouring several dismembered bodies. Corpse. Seeds of corrosion have no mouths, but their tentacles have the ability to absorb flesh and blood. These monsters inserted several tentacles into the corpse. The warrant officer could even see the deep red flesh flowing into their bodies along the transparent pipes inside the tentacles. Damn. The 3 heads, although there are no mutants, but with just a small pistol, I'm afraid it won't be easy to deal with. The warrant officer subconsciously took a step back, but before he could return to the alley, the 3 corrosive seeds appeared. He gave up on the body on the ground and rushed towards it quickly. They had already discovered him. The warrant officer cursed secretly, raised his gun and shot. But at this moment, the sky above his head suddenly turned dark, as if the sunlight was blocked by something. P.S. Thanks to the 50-cent monk, book friend 20210128035303576, and choose Hillen for the 100 starting coins. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter, author, and Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 531. What? Although the three deadly monsters were less than 15 meters away from the warrant officer couldn't help but raise his head and glance at the sky. He saw a mountain floating in the sky. This mountain is like an elongated water droplet, with a smooth surface glowing with the unique luster of nano-alloy, and a tapered tail covered with 3 rings that shrink in diameter in sequence. This is not a mountain at all, but a mountain. Some kind of aircraft he had never heard of. It was so big that the warrant officer couldn't take in its entirety at a glance. If the thing wasn't flying high enough, he might not even be able to see the edge of the aircraft. This thing floated almost silently over the Mukake base, like a cloud, without making any sound. Darkness enveloped the two warring parties without warning. At this time, even if the battle was the most intense in various places, people could not help but raise their heads and look into the sky. An indescribable sense of oppression welled up from the lieutenant's heart. He suddenly felt that his throat was dry, and a burning pain was spreading. The three-headed erosion seeds had already rushed forward, and their elongated tentacles were facing him. It was struck in the head, but the warrant officer had no desire to dodge. Before that thing appeared in the sky, he thought that the defenders at Muka base could fight the invaders. Even if they would pay a heavy price, it would not be impossible. They had a chance to defend the base, but when this thing appeared, the warrant officer suddenly felt that all their resistance was meaningless. Your mother is going to give you a hammer. The warrant officer thought a little desperately. If he read it correctly, the thing in the sky seems to be cast from ultra-high purity nano-alloy. As a senior veteran, the warrant officer knows very well how dense nano-alloy is. He couldn't even imagine how powerful the driving device of such a thing was floating in the sky. Even if ARC's fleet could arrive to support them, they would have no chance of winning. It's better to just be killed by the seed of corrosion. At least, you don't have to see the tragedy of the entire base being bulldozed by that thing in the sky. The warrant officer closed his eyes. He could even hear the sound of the wind tearing through the air as the tentacles tore through it, and the fishy smell hit his face. Damn it, if only he could have a cigarette in his mouth at this time. He remembered that in many movies, those free and handsome characters did this before they died. Even if you don't have cigarettes, it would be nice to have a drink. If you had known, you would have just asked Pons to hand over the flask. Although drinking is strictly prohibited during duty hours, the warrant officer knows that there is always a tin hidden in the secret pocket on the inside of Pons's backpack. Exquisite wine flask. It was filled with top-quality wine. This guy dated a girlfriend last year who was in charge of marketing high-end drinks. As a result, when the drunkard was bragging to his comrades, he never talked about how beautiful the face and body of the marketing girl were. Every time he mentioned his girlfriend, he said that he had sent him some top-notch wine, although many of these wines were defective products that failed to pass the quality inspection. But for these soldiers who could hardly return to the Ark for several months, they were definitely considered unacceptable. So many good things. Many past events flashed before the warrant officer's eyes one by one, from when he first joined the army, to his first shot, to his first kill. The blurry scenes flashed like old slides, and those dust-laden scenes flashed before his eyes. Long-lasting memories keep flooding into my mind. This is probably the legendary revolving lantern that appears before a person dies, right? The warrant officer took a deep breath and waited silently for death to come. The pain shouldn't last long, right? Time seemed to have passed for a long time, but the tentacles that were supposed to hit him and tear his body apart never fell. What happened? The warrant officer muttered to himself, has this been 10 seconds already? Why, Am I still alive? Could it be that the three monsters were attracted by other targets? That's not right. The tentacles were about to hit him just now. In less than half a second, he would turn into a corpse. There was absolutely no reason for them to stop in this situation. The warrant officer opened his eyes a little and looked straight ahead. The alley was empty, and the three erosion seeds disappeared without a trace. The warrant officer opened his eyes completely. The three erosion seeds had indeed disappeared, but there were three pools of clear liquid on the ground. In these three pools of liquid, there were also a few small tentacle ends and a little transparent liquid soaked in them. Colorful pieces of meat. The nerve tissue in these remains has not completely died, and the muscles are still twitching rhythmically. Those three seeds of corrosion were killed. The warrant officer felt that his brain was short-circuited. He would rather believe that the three seeds of corrosion had left the alley, rather than believe that they had turned into these on the ground. Even if someone takes action to kill the seed of corrosion, they won't even leave their bodies behind, right? Only a few seconds had passed, and that was all that was left of the three-headed corrosive seed that was larger than an adult man? Even if active bullets were used to sieve them, it would take some time for the corpses to undergo necrosis and degradation. What's more, the warrant officer did not hear the sound of shooting at all. Lying quietly in the liquid were several special warheads of active ammunition, which were 0.45-inch pistol bullet specifications. These were the bullets the warrant officer had just fired. The charges of these bullets were sufficient to ensure that they did not hit the core. It is impossible to have a fatal effect on the erosion seeds, let alone evaporate their corpses. Could it be some kind of new active ammunition using soluble warheads, sniping from a distance? The warrant officer looked around blankly. He was the only one in the alley. From this position, if he wanted to shoot from outside the alley and hit the three erosion seeds, the only angle would be. He raised his head. It's impossible, he murmured as he looked at the big guy floating above the base. At this moment, the walkie-talkie hanging on his shoulder suddenly rang. Although it was mixed with a lot of electrical noise, the warrant officer could still recognize Sergeant Ponz's voice. The other party's tone was extremely excited, even mixed with a hint of madness. Warrant officer. Warrant officer, are you still there? Look at that monster, the biggest monster that came out of the ground. That monster. And that one who suddenly appeared in that thing in the sky. I don't know if it's an enemy, if it's our enemy, but it seems to be attacking that monster. Pons said incoherently. Although the order of his words was extremely confusing, the warrant officer still understood what he wanted to express. The big guy that appeared above the base was attacking the giant centipede. How is this going? The warrant officer couldn't help but raise his head and take a deep look at the giant water drop-shaped aircraft. Could it be that this big guy is a friendly force? When did humans have such weapons? The warrant officer's expression changed slightly, and he quickly turned his eyes to search the surroundings. Soon, he found what he was looking for. It was a small building that was collapsed by artillery shells. The collapsed load-bearing wall happened to be leaning on another house that was not too seriously damaged, forming a slope for climbing. Along this slope, the warrant officer quickly climbed to the roof, took out his binoculars, and turned to look in the direction of the first blocking line. That location is where the ground collapsed and the giant centipede broke out of the ground. A faint, seemingly innocuous beam of light shot out from below the water droplet aircraft, shrouding the giant centipede in it. The giant centipede was struggling violently, but could not break free from the shackles of the beam. The flesh and blood on the giant centipede's body was rapidly disintegrating, but the flesh and blood separated from it did not fall down. Instead, it completely ignored the gravity of Alpha Star and flew towards the big guy above. The large amount of blood even formed a high-speed rotating blood column. This scene reminded the warrant officer of a weather phenomenon called dragon absorbing water. Dragon absorbs water is just a common name. In meteorology, the scientific name of this thing is called tornado. Tornadoes are caused by the rapid rotation of air currents that carry water vapor, dust, and sand from the ground into the air. On the Earth, the most powerful tornadoes are enough to destroy masonry houses and uproot trees weighing several tons. On Alpha Planet, the most destructive tornado recorded was the Wilson Serpent 1 that occurred in Wilson Plain. The Wilson Serpent 1 directly destroyed the Wilson military base under construction and caused the death of more than 500 soldiers and workers. One survivor said that he even witnessed heavy engineering weighing more than 100 tons. The tracked vehicle was swept several hundred meters into the sky by the tornado, and then fell down. Its power was no less than that of a 200 mm caliber heavy artillery firing a direct shot at the ground. But neither the super tornado on the Earth nor the Wilson Serpent No. 1 can kill the erosion seed. The Institute even threw an erosion seed into a wind that was more than 10 times stronger than the Wilson Serpent. Times inside the fan, but except for a few tentacles sucked into the turbine that were cut off by the blades, the erosion seeds were almost undamaged. This is just an ordinary erosion seed, and the physical strength of the mutant species is even higher than this. As for this giant centipede, you must know that it penetrated the foundation of the base where more than 10 million tons of molten steel was poured, but now, its body seems to be made of paper. The paper used is still the same kind. Shoddy, low-quality toilet paper that will rot as soon as you pull it off without even touching it with water. Moreover, if there really is a power that can tear this kind of monster apart, then the Muka base may be razed to the ground. However, also shrouded in light beams, the building debris near the pit makes no movement at all. No. Not to mention the spectacular scene of the entire house and car being sucked into the air, even the small gravel-like gravel did not move at all and lay quietly on the ground. That beam of light seemed to only harm giant centipedes. The warrant officer noticed that there were many corpses of human soldiers on the ground in the area within the beam of light, but these corpses were also not affected in any way. Really, is it a friendly force? The warrant officer turned the intercom to the public channel in a daze, but found that no one in the base knew the origin of the big guy in the sky, and everyone was asking similar questions. Moreover, everyone also discovered another thing that shocked them extremely: the corrosive species that invaded the base, whether they were ordinary species or mutant species, died suddenly in an incredible way in an instant, and even one person died suddenly. No intact bodies were left. Some people said that he saw with his own eyes the flesh and blood of the erosion seeds turned into a thin thread and was sucked into the air, sucked into the interior of the giant aircraft above. If this big guy is attacking the giant centipede, then were the three-headed erosion seeds just killed by it too? It killed the erosion seed and saved itself, but it did not attack itself. The warrant officer believed that if this big guy wanted to kill the humans in the base, it would not need to expend any effort, but it did not do so. Could this thing really be a secret weapon secretly developed by ARC's top brass? Wrong. With such a large volume, the resources and labor required for construction are absolutely astronomical. If there is such a project, it is absolutely impossible to hide it. Besides, it has only been 51 years since the Ark landed on Alpha Planet. 51 years ago in a year, unless part of the Ark is dismantled, there will be no time to build such a big thing. Moreover, the shell of this thing is made of high-purity nanoalloy, in such a large amount. Even if all the things containing nanoalloy in human hands are smelted out, it will only be a drop in the bucket. There is absolutely no way this thing is a human creation. Just as the warrant officer was thinking this, a slightly younger voice suddenly rang from the intercom microphone. Not only his walkie-talkie, but all the communication equipment in the base, including the dumbfounded Lieutenant General Maginot and Colonel Levi's communication terminals sitting on the helicopter, also received voice messages from the public channel at the same time. There is no need to panic. This ship is codenamed Yagunactor and has been ordered to set off from the Molten Mine area to assist the Muka military base. The operation number is SSTW-5509, and the ship's temporary identification code is ZZZ999. The molten mine area? Hasn't the molten mine area already fallen? How could it come out of there? Maginot asked in shock. Suddenly, he felt that the young voice sounded familiar. He searched in his memory for a long time before he found a name that matched the voice. Are you Kaylan? Kaylan from the God Hunting Group. Is that you? Maginot completely ignored his image and shouted in the public channel. Everyone in the base heard the name. It's me, long time no see, Lieutenant General Maginot. What a coincidence, I didn't expect to meet you here, the young voice responded. P.S. Thanks to book friend 20210118205855927 for the 500 starting coins. Thank you Mr. Han for the 100 starting coins. Alien Relic Hunter author, and Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 532. It's really you, Lieutenant General Maginot seemed to have forgotten that the helicopter was hovering in the sky and stood up from his seat. Why are you here? And, what on earth is this thing? You are you in this battleship now? General Maginot, I think I have to remind you that this is a public channel, Kaylan said softly. Everyone can hear our conversation, he added. Maginot was stunned for a moment. He subconsciously wanted to switch channels, but found that he had no idea how to establish communication with Kaylan other than the unencrypted public channel. The ship identification code of Yagunactor is ZZZ999, but this is only a temporary code. Levi checked with the computer at hand. This code was indeed in the Field Army's combat sequence, but it had just been added 3 minutes ago. Except for the code name Yagunactor, all the information was its blank. He raised his head, nodded to Lieutenant General Maginot, and then shook his head. The nod means that there is nothing wrong with what Kaylan said. This exaggeratedly large battleship is indeed here to support the friendly forces at Mukake Base. There is no problem with the ship identification code and operation number. The ARCBN has also confirmed the identity of this battleship. And then he shook his head because he couldn't find any information about this battleship at all, and he couldn't contact Kaylan through any means other than public channels. But fortunately, the erosion seeds and giant centipedes that invaded the base have been eliminated, so this matter is not rushed, but Levi always feels that even after this matter is over, it may be difficult for them to figure out these problems. The answer, maybe, they will have to sign a hush agreement that is more than 10 pages thick. At the same time, the soldiers in the base who had recovered from the shock began to ask each other, wondering if anyone had ever heard of this name or seen this battleship. Kaylan, the warrant officer, muttered the name silently. The new Lieutenant General Maginot who just arrived seems to know him, and he said he is Kaylan from the God Hunting Group. The God Hunting Group, isn't he a soldier, but a relic hunter? Could it be that this battleship, which is many times larger than the entire Mukake base, is controlled by a relic hunter? Is this, what a joke. Muka military base is an important transportation center at the junction of the 4 major planes. The soldiers stationed here often see some relic hunters passing by. Warrant officers are not unfamiliar with this profession. But in his impression, the equipment of most ruin hunters is limited to a level similar to that of elite mercenaries, not to mention that there are many low-level hunters with shabby clothes and sallow faces. Those people simply cannot be called ruin hunters. It would be more appropriate to call them scavengers. This kind of scavengers basically do not have the ability to independently explore ruins. They can only follow other hunters, pick up some garbage left by others and take it back to exchange for a few dollars. If they are lucky, they can also eat some leftovers. Tang tang shui shui, if you are not very lucky, you can basically only do some hard work for other hunters in exchange for some hard-earned money. Being able to work is not the worst thing. Some hunters who borrowed loan sharks to buy equipment even had to sacrifice their own lives in exchange for money in order to repay their debts. For example, they would clear the way for those high-level hunters who cherished their lives, and use their bodies to explore the ruins. Agency. It's not that he looks down on relic hunters, but warrant officer always has an indescribable feeling of disgust towards this profit-oriented profession. Of course, there are elites in the hunting group, who are so well equipped that even the agents of the Security Bureau cannot match them. But no matter how well equipped they are, a suit that can last from head to toe only costs $1 million, and the cost can easily reach tens of billions. Compared with the warships, it is simply 1,000 miles away. Compared with the warships costing tens of billions to build in front of the sky, they are even more than 180,000 miles away. The main warships of the Ark fleet, in front of this big guy, are at best the kind of things that are put on the table. A plastic model of an ornament. How could a relic hunter possess such a thing? Could it be that this battleship was made by the Alpha civilization, and was dug out of the ruins by this ruin hunter named Kaylan? The warrant officer himself was shocked by his own idea. Fortunately, this relic hunter still obeys the control of Ark. If he chooses to join the camp of the heretic sect or simply establish his own business, the consequences are simply unimaginable. The warrant officer was thinking about these things as he walked out of the alley, but he happened to bump into several soldiers carrying a man out of a dormitory building with only the bottom floor remaining. The warrant officer took a closer look and saw that these soldiers were all his subordinates. They were the team he had returned to the camp to rescue, but he was the only one who did not see Sergeant McCarthy leading the team. "Where's McCarthy?" As soon as he asked, he realized that these people were carrying McCarthy, who was seriously injured and unconscious. McCarthy's right leg was cut off at the root. Even though emergency treatment was done to stop the bleeding, blood still seeped out from under the gauze and dripped to the ground. "Warrant officer? Why are you here? Answer my question first. What happened to McCarthy?" the warrant officer continued to ask. "Sergeant McCarthy is injured. We plan to send him to a medical point," a soldier replied. "How did you get injured?" Looking at the blood on the hands of the soldiers, the warrant officer looked stern and asked in a nervous tone. "He was injured by a mutant. Fortunately, our reinforcements killed that monster, I mean that thing in the sky, otherwise, our entire team would probably have to be found here." Injured by a mutant, the warrant officer subconsciously took out the pistol loaded with active ammunition. "Warrant officer. Wait. Don't shoot." A medic with a snake staff logo on his shoulder rushed forward and stood in front of McCarthy. Sergeant McCarthy was not infected. The first time he was injured, I performed amputation surgery for him. "Where is the injured part?" the warrant officer asked coldly. "It's the ankle. The mutant's tentacles had barbs on them, and they hooked Sergeant McCarthy's ankle and dragged him to the ground. Just when we thought Sergeant McCarthy was about to be killed, the mutant my body suddenly collapsed." The medical soldier recounted the situation, but the barbs on the tentacles pierced the combat boots and penetrated into Sergeant McCarthy's flesh. "I was worried that the sergeant was infected. Just amputated his entire leg. The ankle was injured and the leg was amputated immediately at the base of the leg. The whole process only took a few minutes at most. The spread of the invading cells should not be that fast." The warrant officer thought to himself, but the one who attacked McCarthy was a mutant. The planted cells cannot be viewed with ordinary eyes, and there is a high risk of parasitism. This way the warrant officer put away his gun and said to the medic, "Don't send him to the medical station, send him to the seat of corrosion container processing department, explain the details to the people there, and ask them to report it to McCarthy. Do a detailed examination." "Oh, yes, you guys, everyone who has had direct or indirect contact with McCarthy's body and blood should also undergo a detailed examination, and then report to the isolation area by yourself, and return after 72 hours. After an inspection, if there are no problems, you will be allowed to return to the team." 72 hours? But, warrant officer, there is no battle yet. The battle is over. The warrant officer raised his head, glanced at the Yagonactor suspended in the air, and repeated, "The battle is over. Even if it's not over yet, it's not something we can interfere with." To the extent. Warrant officer, I seem to have heard someone say that our reinforcements are not regular troops, but relic hunters. The medic lowered his voice slightly and said, "This matter is not our responsibility, but whether he is a relic hunter or something else, at least he saved us and the entire base." The warrant officer said seriously, "Okay, send McCarthy over quickly, and then if you drag him on, he will bleed dry." "What about you, warrant officer?" the medic asked. I'll go to the first blocking line to have a look," the warrant officer replied. "There's no one alive there anymore." "I know." On the other side, Maginot and Levi began to organize their men to clean the battlefield and treat the wounded. With the Yagonactor holding down the formation above the base, they did not need to worry about the second wave of attacks from the heretical section. There is no need to rush to seal the collapsed wall immediately. Of course, the huge pit is still a restricted area, and all soldiers have received orders not to approach it, except for one group, the Molten Mine Area Reconnaissance Team that just came out of Agunakotair. Everyone in the reconnaissance team, except Kaylan, had landed on the ground at this time. They didn't even need to go through the long tunnel. Kaylan opened a portal for them directly in the power room. "Send them to the outside of the battleship, and then use a transportation tool similar to an anti-gravity elevator to let them land safely on the ground. It's much more convenient to come out than to go in," Hound said with a smile. "It's really convenient to send something like this. It would be great if the guys at the Institute could imitate it. Even if we could build it, we wouldn't be able to use it at all." Ian's voice sounded in the team channel. "The energy consumption of this device is so great that you can't even imagine. You know, this battleship absorbs enough energy at the bottom of the magma pool. With enough geothermal energy for 10,000 years, it can only be used about 2,000 times for transmission over this distance. In other words, after 5 years of soaking in a magma bath, you can use one teleportation." "Right," Layton thought, "but from the power room to the outside of the battleship, it has to be a distance of more than 10 kilometers. This consumption is not exaggerated." "Can it be teleported further?" the Hound asked again. "For example, can you teleport me directly back to the Ark?" "No," Kaylan replied, "the teleportation function can only be used inside the battleship or within a range of less than 1 kilometer from the battleship. If it exceeds this range, the battleship's own protection device will not be able to take effect on the teleportation object." "Protective device? What will happen if this protective device is not used?" the Hound was a little curious. "It's like you were sucked into a black hole wearing only a pair of big underpants," Layton answered for Kaylan. "Then will I be able to time travel?" Hound scratched his head. "I was bored and read some online novels before. The protagonists in them were sucked into a black hole. Wouldn't they all travel to a parallel world? There is a parallel world in which there are only women and men in the world. There is only one protagonist. It would be great if I could travel to this kind of world." "You can travel through time. Do you still remember how many people died when the Ark passed through the wormhole? The physical body entered the black hole, and before you even got close to the edge of the black hole, your body was broken down into tiny particles that were invisible to the naked eye." Okay, it was easy to seize the opportunity, so naturally Layton would not let it go and complained about the Hound. "Moreover, even if there is such a parallel world, you will only be captured by those women and used as a research object, just like a guinea pig in a glass bottle." Yvonne also added a stab. "Hey, wasn't I just joking? I managed to escape death once, and you guys still took me seriously when I said a few jokes," the Hound said with a smile, while picking out a big lump of nose from his nostrils. "Shit," when Layton wasn't paying attention, he smeared it on his butt. "Although long-distance teleportation is not possible, I just checked and it seems that this battleship is equipped with a jump device," Kaylan said. "It just consumes too much energy. If you want to launch a jump, you must at least be in a magma pool. Soak for tens of thousands of years. Jump device? It's the kind of thing that can accelerate objects to above the speed of light and can jump even if there is no natural wormhole. Layton was stunned for a moment. I heard that a group of people in the institute have been tinkering with this thing. It seems what kind of curvature drive is used to break the limit that the speed of light cannot break, but the curvature drive must first have the ability to fold space, and it will have a permanent impact on the trajectory. The principle of the curvature drive engine is to expand the curvature of the universe itself to accelerate objects, just like the limit speed of a car traveling on a flat surface is 100 km per hour, but if the road is changed to a direction down the slope or simply vertical, then on this special road, this car can easily exceed the original speed limit. P.S. Thanks to the self-proclaimed Fool Mo Cannon for the 1,500 starting coins, thank you Mr. Han for the 100 starting coins. This guy said yesterday that he rewarded 200 coins instead of 100 coins. In fact, the backend was stuck, only one reward record was displayed, the starting point was pot orts. PPS again, all the content in this book that involves professional knowledge, such as jumps, teleportation, wormholes, curvature drive engines, etc., is purely nonsense from the author. Please do not take it seriously and do not compare it with anything in the real world. The things with the same name fit right in. Reading the novel is just for fun, and it would be boring to argue with each other.